If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Gene Curl. Actually, my name is Gene Curl, even if you're not new to my channel. And I'm glad you stopped by, and hopefully I will make it worth your while. And if you've been around for a while, you will immediately notice that this video is a rather large departure from the type of videos that I typically put up here. And I should tell you why. Also, I don't know if you can hear this. I've got a candle over here that's got one of those, the wick makes popping noises. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and blow it out. Okay. But I have always been a creative type of person, but I felt constrained by what I thought people expected of me, and I steered clear of any controversial topics. And instead, I tried to post videos that would get views and subscribers. But as I'm currently at 239 subscribers, it's obvious how that worked out. Also, I didn't really enjoy making many of the videos I put up over the past few years, which is why I've posted so few videos. I have decided that going forward, to only make videos that are true to who I am and that are about things that I care about. I will leave my other videos up, but from here on out, I will make videos on faith and spirituality, journaling, mental health, and probably an occasional fountain pen video. But all three, journaling, mental health, and spirituality, are closely related in my mind and according to a lot of professionals. In fact, both my internal medicine doctor or general practitioner and my therapist were highly pleased that I journal, and they both encouraged me to continue, saying that there are many positive benefits to it, including many health benefits. I've debated and agonized for a long time over whether or not I should make this video and this video series. If all goes according to plan, this will be the first video in a multi-part series about my spiritual journey. What held me back from making this video is that I was afraid that it may offend people, though that is not my intention. And I was afraid that it may make some people angry with me and may limit my future opportunities, as openness in some areas is considered taboo. And any opinion on religion that differs from what is popular is basically social suicide. But let's face it, I was never going to be president or a celebrity anyway. What ultimately led me to the decision to make and upload this video is a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche that says, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." I will go into this more later, but I'm well aware of what the cost of owning myself is, and I've paid it before. But having determined it wasn't worth it due to a lapse in judgment, I temporarily returned to the tribe and remained until I just couldn't do it anymore. This video is going to be a brief overview of my spiritual journey, let's say a 35,000-foot flyover. What my motivation is for making the video series, what I hope to accomplish with it, and what this video series isn't. I will start with what this video series isn't. This series is not an attack on faith or religion, and is in no way intended to be offensive or to bash anyone's faith, nor is it an attempt to cause people to lose their faith. Though I would be disingenuous if I didn't admit that I think the only way to truly save humanity is to let go of religion and superstition and embrace science, as well as our individual and shared humanity, instead of feeling guilt and shame for what makes us human. This video series is also not meant to be a detailed explanation of any complex science subject or topic, or a deep philosophical argument for my beliefs or lack thereof. Those topics may be covered later outside of this video series. What I hope to accomplish with this video series is to be true to myself and to who I am, and to explain why I hold the beliefs that I do, and how I got there. And I hope to help those who are struggling with faith and feel that they are alone to realize that they are not alone, and that there is great freedom on the other side of faith, but that it comes at a cost. However, no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Part of what made me decide to do this series is the religious trauma support group that I'm in. Though it was not suggested by the facilitators of the group or any of the people in the group, I just came to the conclusion that there are a lot of people who are like me, and I realize that many of them feel alone and don't know where to turn. I want to be the friend and the resource I needed when I was transitioning out of faith. The Reader's Digest version of my faith journey is that I was raised in an abusive and highly religious home, and my father was a want-to-be cult leader with dangerous and crazy beliefs. When I was in my late teens, I made friends with people who belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the artist formerly known as Mormon. And I was baptized into the church a month after my 20th birthday. When I joined the church, I was all in, and I dedicated my entire life to it, and every decision I made was filtered through the lens of the church. And I had been a member of the church for a little more than a year when I left home to serve a full-time 2-year mission for the church. And I was the most obedient and the hardest working missionary that I could possibly be. And I even wrote on the back of my name tag, "Exceed the commitment required." Some years after my mission, I learned some alarming things about the church that shook my faith. But I decided to remain in the church, and I did all I could to convince myself that it was the true church. Eventually, after getting married in the LDS temple, my faith eroded to the point where I could no longer pretend to believe it, and I left the church, which was a major contributor to my divorce. When I first lost my faith, I was extremely strident against religion, and I made it my mission to cause other people to doubt their faith. But you don't win anyone over by being angry with them, and that is why I think whenever anyone loses his or her faith, they should just shut up and keep it to themselves for a year or so until they calm down a little and work out some of their anger so that they can address the bad ideas without attacking the people who fell victim to those bad ideas. After years as an out and proud atheist, and even an anti-theist, I longed to belong to something bigger than myself, and I longed to have friends. But since I was living in Missouri, I couldn't find any like-minded people and decided to go back to church and try to believe it. And I put my all into believing in God, and I started attending a Baptist church. I even started a Christian podcast in an attempt to grow my faith. After 5 years of praying, reading the Bible, attending church, and several years of hosting a Christian podcast, I determined that it was a failed experiment and once again stopped going to church, a decision which cost me most of my friends, even without speaking out against the faith. Of course, there's a lot more to my story, but that was the 35,000-foot overview. I've been pretty good about keeping a journal for most of my life, and therefore I have a good record of events and even my thoughts and feelings, so it's easy for me to reconstruct what happened without too much worry of changing what really happened to fit my current narrative. Now, I gave a brief overview of the whole, but I'm going to try to give a little bit more picture of how it was growing up, my early life and my faith. My childhood was quite traumatic, and there is a lot of it that I don't like to talk about. So I will be intentionally vague, but consider this a trigger warning that there will be some mention of child abuse. I don't remember a time during my childhood where religion didn't play a large part, and my father, being an ordained minister, brought God and the Bible into every conversation, even if it had to be shoehorned in. My father was well versed in the Bible and could practically quote the entire thing, including chapter and verse. But he was quite capricious and extremely violent. I could not ask any questions about what I was being taught, as it was viewed as a challenge to my father's authority and or doctrine, and such was met with the most extreme punishment. My father said that he was the next great prophet, and that the only person to ever be born who was more righteous than him was Jesus Christ. My father often claimed to be so righteous that he couldn't sin, and whenever he did anything wrong, he blamed it on me or other members of the family, saying that we brought sin into the home and that what he did was our fault. One of the key aspects of my father's doctrine was that he was chosen to usher in the end of the world and that he would live forever and that his body would never die. But since he's been dead for almost 20 years, he was obviously mistaken. My father always talked about visions or heavenly visitors that came to talk to him or telling us what God just told him. What God wanted was always in line with what my father wanted. I think it's important to mention that even though I sometimes doubted my father and even aspects of the Bible, such as the Noah and the Ark story, I never doubted the existence of God while growing up, though I did have some serious doubts as to his concern for me, and at times I was convinced that God hated me. Of course, my father often told me that God hated me, and that there was nothing I could do to be saved, partially because of my red hair. Other times, my father told me that I could be saved if I did everything that God wanted me to do. But the problem was, the rules were always changing. When I was 10 or 11 years old, I decided I wanted to see what the Bible really said, and I read the King James Version cover to cover. But when I started asking my father questions, because what he was teaching was not in line with the Bible, he took the Bible away from me and said that he didn't want me reading it on my own because I was misinterpreting it. Mark Twain is reported as saying, "Most people are bothered by those passages of scriptures which they cannot understand. But as for me, I have always noticed that the passage of Scripture which troubles me the most are those which I do understand." Well, I agree with Mark Twain, and in a future video I will go into some detail into some of my issues with the Bible. But not this episode. Not only was I always afraid that I would make my father upset and get beaten for it, I was also terrified that I would offend God and go to hell. I was constantly begging God for forgiveness for things that I thought, even if I didn't entertain the thought, and it was just something that popped into my head. Because to think something was the same as to do it. I could never relax out of fear of sinning and losing my salvation. One of the doctrines my father taught that had the biggest impact on me and caused me the most trauma was a doctrine that is widespread throughout Christianity. And that is the doctrine that we are all born sinful, broken, and worthless, and nothing we do will ever be enough, that our best works are like filthy rags, and that we are only worth something if we can garner the love and forgiveness of Jesus. Of course, once Jesus forgives us, he expects us to always berate ourselves for our sin that made it necessary for him to die in the first place. Not only was I always worried that I may make God mad and go to hell, I always felt guilty and shameful that I didn't feel more guilty and shameful over being a sinful human and for not showing Jesus more gratitude for what he had done for me, even though I never asked Jesus to die for me in the first place. As a natural result of the abuse I suffered and the doctrine I was taught, I hated myself, and I felt like I was the most unworthy and shameful person on the earth. And I pretty much thought that my father was right and that I was far too wicked for Jesus to ever love. I also felt that if God couldn't love me, getting another person to love me was completely impossible. In the book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, it is said that we accept the love that we think we deserve, which is why I had so many toxic relationships in my life. On some level, I thought I deserved to be hurt and abused, so I would stay with people who treated me that way. I often would refrain from asking a woman out that I liked because I thought that I wasn't good enough for her. After 19 years of intense abuse at the hands of my father, he was suddenly out of the picture when he went to prison, but not for anything he did to me. I'm not going to go into why my father went to prison, though, but suffice it to say that he was an absolutely horrible person and that I am far from his only victim. And some of his crimes finally caught up with him. My father died of a massive heart attack 2 years into his 5-year sentence. By the way, I was highly disappointed when my father was only sentenced to 5 years, but he wasn't tried for his most egregious crimes due to lack of evidence. My father went out of this world firmly believing that he would go to heaven and I would go to hell, and there were times when I was not sure he was wrong in that assessment. Shortly after my father got arrested, I threw my Bible away, and I wanted nothing to do with religion. But I had a super realistic dream in which I went to hell and decided that I needed to find another church. And briefly, I'm just going to tell you that dream. So I had this dream where I went to heaven. Not heaven, I mean, I went to hell. And I was in this big floating building. It was like a castle with no windows. And you couldn't jump out the windows, of course, because if you jumped out the window, you'd fall down into the valley below and die. But I was trapped there, not chained or anything. I was just trapped in this building. And I looked out the window and I saw Jesus with a bunch of children, and they were all super happy. And I was going to try to call out to Jesus to save me. But the devil came and put his hand over my mouth and told me that I couldn't call out to Jesus because I had already made my choice and that I was stuck with him forever. And that was one of those extremely realistic dreams. So when I woke up, I was it kind of scared me. And I decided I needed to start going to church again. I don't know if you can hear the train. There's nothing I can do about it. A train comes by every morning at about between 3 and 4. So anyhow, another factor in my decision to find a church is that I had never had freedom before. And having unrestrained freedom scared me, and I felt I needed someone to tell me what to do. So I willingly gave up my freedom in exchange for the strict rules of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But that's a story that I'll tell in my next video. There's much more to tell in my story. So if you liked this video, or if you enjoyed it or got anything out of it, please click the like button. And also, don't forget to subscribe so that you can hear the rest of my story. Thanks for watching, and check out the next video to continue the journey with me.